Is drinking alcohol something that you would say is too dangerous to do in even moderate amounts?
There's no really safe level. This is what the World Health Organization advises. The alcohol you find in beer, wine, and spirits is what they call a group 1 carcinogen. And it's categorized with asbestos and tobacco. And in fact, if you look at the cancer risk of alcohol versus tobacco, it's about 1-to-1. If you see one cigarette, one drink of alcohol, the mortality risk from cancer is about 1-to-1.
We're going to be talking about the benefits and risks of alcohol. Hello and welcome to the Enjoy Life Healthier podcast. I'm Jason Kam. Thank you so much for joining us. We have a fascinating program here for you today. We are going to be getting into a subject that a lot of people are really going to enjoy. We're going to be talking about the pros and cons, the benefits and risks, really, of alcohol. So whether you are a moderate drinker or you drink more than you probably should, we're going to hear from an expert today on what the consequences could be. We're going to get into some of the latest research. We're going to learn about alcohol as a public policy. We're talking with Dr. Tim Stockwell. Dr. Stockwell is a professor at the University of Victoria. He is a scientist at the Canadian Institute for Substance Use Research. And Dr. Stockwell, thank you so much for hopping on today. We really appreciate it.
Yes, good morning for me, good afternoon for you. It's a pleasure to join you.
Okay, well, why don't we jump right in with your background? How did you get interested in studying all things related to alcohol?
Yeah, well, I've had a nice long career, which is right near the end. I'm semi-retired, so I actually started in the late 70s, would you believe, in Edinburgh. You can probably tell from my accent.
I was just in Scotland last week.
I wasn't born, I'm not actually Scottish, I'm English, but I was working in Edinburgh and I had to choose an PhD topic. And my one of my mentors was particularly interested in that area. And I just got fascinated. I mean, I'd had my own struggles with addiction, tobacco-related addiction, and as a psychologist, I was pretty intrigued as to why we do this and, why we find it so hard to moderate our use of substances.
Right. Well, look, hopefully you're not going to be too much of a party pooper today. So look, why don't we get right to the point? Is drinking alcohol something that you would say is too dangerous to do in even moderate amounts? What are the risks and benefits? Can you give us an overview?
I mean, too dangerous sounds very alarming. I think the reality is that we now know that alcohol has risks that start at low levels of drinking and they just increase the more you drink. In fact, they accelerate above certain levels, but there's no really safe level. This is what the World Health Organization advises. And the idea that it's actually going to be good for our heart health, for example, is now fiercely contested and is not widely accepted anymore.
Yeah, so I remember, here in the United States, I know you're Canadian, on 60 Minutes in the 90s, there was a report that they did on something that wound up becoming called the French paradox, where they were trying to explain away the French who drink a lot of wine and alcohol having, at that time, they believed lower risks for heart disease and other ailments. They thought maybe it had something to do with the alcohol they consume, particularly the wine. And I think it became sort of common knowledge that red wine was supposed to be beneficial, at least in moderate amounts. But you're saying that, the latest research is now kind of debunking this?
It's certainly questioning it. The jury's not completely, finished with its work. But the mainstream opinion has flipped in the last 20 years. I mean, there's lots of reasons to suppose it might be good for you if you look at the research, because there's lots of what we'd call observational studies that suggest this like J-shaped curve, so that moderate drinkers live longer than abstainers, but heavy drinkers are worse than both. But
Right.
then in closer examination of those data, it appears that the comparison between people designated as abstainers compared with drinkers is not a fair comparison for lots of reasons. A lot of unhealthy people stop or cut down on drinking, get classed as abstainers, and they make these healthy, surviving people who continue to drink look very healthy by comparison. It becomes a more and more biased comparison. And our research has been about unteasing that and seeing what happens if you compensate for those kind of problems. It appears these prevention, these benefits evaporate. They disappear like the mist on a summer's morning.
Do you know if they've done research looking at particular or specific types of alcohol, so that someone who maybe drinks a glass of wine with dinner frequently might be thinking, well, I'm not drinking scotch or tequila or whiskey, something harder. Are there nuances between different varieties of alcohol, beer versus wine versus hard liquor?
The conventional scientific view now is no. And if there are some benefits, some particular additives, we're not talking about the ethanol, things that ingredients in wine, they are at such low levels, it's very hard to get any major benefit. You may as well, go jogging or something instead, or eat red grapes, because it's apparently whatever it is in the skin of the grape. The ethanol itself, so these benefits appear to apply for spirits, beer, wine. It didn't matter. It didn't matter what the beverage was. These apparent benefits, and the apparent benefits disappear no matter what the beverage type when the design problems in these studies are dealt with.
And have they looked specifically at the amount of alcohol consumed, where someone who will have a beer and or a glass of wine a few nights a week, would you say that they are, to what extent are they increasing their various health risks? And then I'd like you to get into what exactly are the health risks when you drink alcohol. What areas of health are most affected?
Right. So I think where you were going there is like whether like a binge style is worse for you than sort of like steady sipping. And so the Mediterranean approach to drinking is very different from like a Northern European one, which is more binge drinking. And so we do know on the flip side that the binge drinking pattern is bad for you. And if there were any benefits, they vanished if you're a binge drinker. So drinking, a little and often is not nearly as bad for you as saving it all up for one night each week. That we do know. So in terms of the kind of health concerns, a big area of concern now is cancer. And this comes as a surprise to many people. The World Health Organization advised that the alcohol you find in beer, wine, and spirits is what they call a group 1 carcinogen. And it's categorized with asbestos and tobacco.
Wow.
And in fact, if you look at the cancer risk of alcohol versus tobacco, it's about 1-to-1. If you see one cigarette, one drink of alcohol, the mortality risk from cancer is about 1-to-1.
Wow.
And the overall mortality risk for alcohol goes up the more you drink. So it's like if you're drinking 3 or 4 drinks a day, every day, per drink, that's the equivalent of about 2 or 3 cigarettes. So I suppose like 3 drinks a day is like 10 cigarettes a day for a cancer risk.
Wow.
So, and people know about the liver, and of course everyone's aware of safety issues. And of course, if a woman is pregnant, then there's risks to the child. So there's a range of things that many are common knowledge and a lot aren't.
So what are you seeing in terms of changes, if any, in drinking habits? I can say I have 2 college-age sons, and I feel like they are not drinking as much alcohol as, and this could just be, a case of N of 2, my 2 sons, and their friends. But I feel like the kids don't drink quite as much as they were. Now, I think if there is a gap or a reduction in alcohol, my guess is it's being filled with, I'll just say it, marijuana use, because at least in the United States, marijuana is now legal in many states. Kids are using edibles, beverages with THC. But can you get into, have you looked at that at all?
Yeah, it's kind of a well-known phenomenon. There's conferences that are organized around that. It's been observed in like 30 economically developed countries around the world.
Okay.
That in the last 20 years, young people, teenagers and young adults, are using less alcohol by and large. And it's apparently particularly prominent in countries that used to have a temperance tradition or have like a Protestant kind of more religious background. So there are various theories as to why this might be. And I'll give you my favorite theories. There's some evidence for each, that it tracks the development of the internet. So alcohol's been our favorite drug. And you imagine the places where young men and young women would meet would often be public places where there's alcohol involved. Well, communication is completely different. Social media is what's used for people to hook up and connect with each other. Also, that's expended. Kids are spending money on their digital devices and this content. They have less disposable income. And on disposable income, there's a whole cohort of young people in many countries with massive debt from their student loans.
Yeah.
They have less disposable income. Alcohol's expensive. Not all. There's a problem with cheap alcohol, but by and large, I think these are some of the factors. And sort of young teenagers, the parents are better able to exercise some guardianship because they're in better contact through the digital devices. Those are the main theories.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Another thing I've noticed about young people and alcohol is not as much of a concern with drinking and driving. I guess it's the Uber, and the Lyfts of the world. At least with my sons and their friends, kids seem to know that drinking and driving is not something that you're going to do. Have you looked into that at all? Has there been a reduction in driving accidents related to alcohol?
In many countries, yes, and that's mostly been linked to better enforcement of drink driving laws, and it's also associated with less drinking by young people. So there's a combination of factors. But yes, that would be an accurate observation. Younger people are much more aware of the risks of drinking and driving. And I think the other thing, going back to the internet and why they're drinking less, I mean, when you drink too much and make a fool of yourself, it could be all over social media.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. So in terms of future research, and I know you're really pressed for time here. What are some areas where you think that, need to be explored or you would like to see explored as it relates to the health consequences of alcohol or the larger, broader social consequences of alcohol?
One area, and it's something I'm involved in at the moment, the kind of technical thing, which I won't dive into about why the research to date may have been flawed. It's not just about the benefits not being real. If you're comparing the risk of drinkers with these unhealthy abstainers, this problem is there for all research on alcohol and health. So we need more genetic studies which don't suffer from these problems. And that's a new area of work where you look at people that's random, which genes we happen to get. Some allow us to drink more than others. This is well known. And those genetic studies don't suffer from, the fact that unmeasured lifestyle differences, different behaviors we indulge in. And they show that there are no health benefits and the risks may have been greater than previously thought. So I think this whole area of trying to get a good handle on how big the problem is. And there's a range of cancers at the moment. WHO haven't looked at the kinds of cancers alcohol causes for I think it's 15 years. It's overdue to review. And there's a range of other cancers that are likely alcohol related, which haven't yet been identified. It's bad enough. There's breast cancer, prostate cancer, there's diseases of the digestive system. So we need a better research to evaluate exact impact, because we've been underestimating. All of these studies now seem to be suggesting this is a bigger problem than previously thought. We need to be very, very careful. And so one leading edge thing that's happening is working out how to communicate the size of the risk. So I was talking about one-to-one comparisons with tobacco. Well, there's another way to look at this, which is impacts on life expectancy, depending on how much you drink. So estimates of how many weeks, months, years of life you lose as a result of drinking at a particular level. But, for the average person, it's never precise, because, of course, somebody could live to 110 and still be drinking 3 or 4 drinks a day.
Right.
Or they may be unlucky and die tomorrow. But on average, you can work out the impacts for the average person on their expected, life survival. At what point will they fall off their perch? And this is very concrete information people can get their heads around. If I drink like this, I might live a year less. Or if I'm unlucky, it might be much sooner than that. We need to communicate that accurately so people can make good choices.
Yeah. You would think there would be genetics at play here. We all have a friend that could drink, 3 bottles of wine and not even, be slightly inebriated. And then, someone, they're very sloppy after a few sips. Or I guess, the same thing with addiction. Some people could get addicted to alcohol more easily than others, I'd assume. Is there research looking into this that you're aware of?
Yes, there is a genetic predisposition. But there's twin studies, people who are reared together or separated. There's research showing that there's a strong genetic component, and also the way we metabolize alcohol. So one thing we do know that some people have a flushing response to alcohol. So the face goes red.
Yeah. I have a bunch of Asian friends, and
yes,
right, that's a real thing.
That's called the Oriental flushing response in the literature. And what's going on there is when alcohol is metabolized, you get this thing called acetaldehyde, which is a really nasty carcinogen. And if the body has difficulty metabolizing acetaldehyde, you're in trouble. And so it not only has unpleasant effects, when you're drinking, it actually increases your cancer risk and a range of other things. So that's a very genetic difference, genetically determined difference. It's not just people from Asian background that might get the flushing response.
I was just going to ask, is there anything that people could do if they want to imbibe that could mitigate some of the health risks? Are you certain kinds of foods that you would eat with alcohol, or drink more slowly? Or are there any strategies for people who simply insist that they really enjoy their, responsibly drinking, but would like to mitigate potential health risks?
Yeah. I mean, just the big picture thing is to say that at low levels of consumption, 2, 3, 4 drinks a week, say, your risks are really, really low to begin with. And you can reduce those risks by just, like you say, drinking slowly, spacing out the drinks, not having them all on one day. If you have food with your alcohol, you get lower blood alcohol concentrations, and that lowers risks. Obviously not drinking in certain risky situations where you've got responsibilities for people depending on you, whether it's through work, childcare, whatever, or driving a vehicle, obviously. So basically, drinking little and not too often, and slowly. These are things which will reduce risk.
I wanted to ask you about something. In another podcast that I actually saw you on, you were talking about an issue where perhaps the alcohol industry is, how shall we say, some of the studies might not be biased, or their interpretation of certain studies might be biased. Is that an issue as it relates to the research on alcohol? To what extent
the industry influence is very important, and they have been responsible through their lobbying of delaying all manner of policies that would reduce harm from alcohol. So in the US, your alcohol industry opposed fiercely the introduction of, the enforcement of a legal blood alcohol limit, for example. They've been campaigning to lower the drinking age. They campaign against any taxes or price increases, which are really effective at reducing consumption and harm. They also involved in funding research that presents a more favorable view. So the health benefit research, much of it, particularly in the States, has been funded either by the wine or the beer industry. They've also got lobby groups campaigning worldwide to influence governments, to walk the corridors of power, and basically maneuver their financial leverage and political leverage to stop governments doing things they don't want that make people drink less of their product. In particular, to stop warning labels and health information going on alcohol containers. So alcohol gets a free ride. There's no calorie information on alcohol, let alone good information about the number of standard drinks. They tell us the percent alcohol by volume. We've got to do the math. How big is this container? What's the strength? People don't bother. So if you want to count your drinks, it's really hard. So Australia, New Zealand, they have standard drink information on the bottles. The industry opposed that, but hardly anyone has cancer warnings. So everybody assumes that if there's no cancer warning, it can't be a serious risk, or surely the government would intercede and tell their citizens about serious risks to their health. The industry have stopped that, but through their lobbying and a range of activities.
Yeah, hardly surprising, sad to say. I know you only have a couple of minutes left, so why don't I let you finish up with final thoughts? Any key takeaways for the audience with regards to the risks and benefits of drinking alcohol generally, just to kind of summarize for them?
Yeah, I guess where it's good to go here is while many people have believed this French paradox idea for decades now, I think almost anyone on the planet has got the idea that red wine in particular is likely to protect you from heart disease. We have to throw that aside. And the new way of thinking about alcohol is less is best. And so if you drink less, live longer is a very good way of simplifying things. And just be really cautious. And we take lots of risks in our lives, sparingly drinking occasionally a little, not too often, is going to be a manageable risk for nearly everybody, or just experimenting with not drinking at all. Try dry January or sober October or dry July, whatever. Different countries have different ways, different months in which they try and maybe raise funds, but just experiment with not drinking in situations where you do. And then when you do, just keep it for special occasions and don't overdo it.
That sounds like good advice. Dr. Stockwell, I know you have to run. Thank you so much for joining us today. The information was fantastic.
A pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, enjoy your afternoon. Take care.
Okay, take care.